All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Lewis, and today's topic we're gonna get into some stuff that's probably gonna rattle a little feathers, or rattle a few feathers. But at the end of the day, I think it's just one of those things. Like I said, when I come up here, it's more so me clearing my thought process and clearing my mind, and just kind of letting some stuff roll. Now, so what we're going to talk about today is obviously we're going to dive back into this space of obviously talking about Black culture and the Black community, which obviously being African American, there are things that come up or conversations that come up within the community or just in the space that you see stuff as it's floating around just out there in the ethos that tend to kind of make you question some things or make you look at folks and just ask the question of why. So starting off, obviously, everybody knows what's been going on in the news. Like recently, the person Charlie Kirk that was assassinated, and how his death sparked a whole bunch of controversy and a whole bunch of thoughts, and how things tend to tailspin out of control and stuff like that, and people getting fired because of what they're posting on social media and saying about the person, and this stuff is just a little wild. And more so, like, and you got different communities talking about it, but more so from African American community, you see a lot of folks. You get some folks talking about him saying, hey, like, they might not agree with the stuff that he said, but obviously, no person, deserves to be killed, and especially if they being killed and assassinated in front of their, obviously in front of their family and stuff like that. And then you see people coming out and just saying some real outlandish stuff, just like, hey, this person, didn't like Black people, or this person was racist, whatever, stuff like that. So as I look at all this stuff going on and floating around, like for me, from my personal perspective and personal viewpoint, like I said, I'm just one of those people who, like, I tend to be a little indifferent about it. But obviously, like, I've seen the dude's content, I've seen the stuff that he was posted and talked about. Would I personally believe and say the person was racist? I would say no, and that might piss some people off, and people are like, what do you mean? But my point is, when it comes to stuff like this and these particular topics, is if you're not going based off of your own information and your own digging, you're going off of viewpoints or stuff that you've seen, stuff that was posted and clickbaited, it probably will behoove you to do some digging. And it seems like for us as a culture, this is where a lot of time things come into play and things become an issue. So a lot of times when people that are not Black talk about stuff going on in the Black community, it tends to send the community into a rage. Sometimes warranted, and then I believe sometimes not warranted. But at the same time, the point is, it depends on what the context is the person's talking about and what they're actually saying. So if you dig into it and you actually get down to the nitty gritty, which is why this thing kind of infuriates me when it comes up. But like I said, it's just that thought provoking process for the stuff that's coming up. Is people tend to have this notion of, if you say something against, like, a lot of Black folks, is not all. This is not a blanket statement for everybody in the Black community, because everybody has their own thoughts and viewpoints and opinion. But you get a large majority of the community leaning one way for a particular reason and leaning another. But in this case, it's one of those things where when you call out certain things that you see within your own community, people tend to take it and they'll flip and they'll call you Uncle Tom. They'll call you and say, oh, man, you just going saying this because you're trying to get in with the white folks and get in good and set yourself up, whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, if the stuff that is talked about is rooted in fact, how can it be disagreed with? So if you look at the Black community as a whole, like, there's a lot of stuff that we do, obviously from a culture standpoint, right? Like, culturally, we are rich as a culture. And what I mean by rich culture, I'm not talking about the BS stuff that comes on now, where it's perpetuating, like, obviously rappers doing stuff and athletes and things of that nature. Like, people like, man, this is what I aspire to be, this is what I aspire to get to. Because the culture pretty much wraps around people trying to get to this notion of trying to get to a certain economical standpoint and looking at the quickest way possible to get there. Right. So, like, you're disregarding, and people didn't tend to talk about, like, oh, well, what our ancestors did, and ancestors fought and did X, Y, and Z. Like, a lot of stuff that was invented in America, we all know. If you do your research and understand the forming of this country, there were a lot of Black inventors, a lot of a lot of very smart Black individuals that poured into the country and gave their all to give their contributions to make the country to what it is today. Now, because of the things like racism, because you can't sit there and say that racism does exist, because it still does. But in today's time, as opposed to back then, when you think about racism, it's not the same setup in a sense, and it's not the same concept. And the reason I say not the same concept and setup is because if you look at it, Nowadays, if you literally look at the breakdown of how the country is set up and how stuff in the world is going on in general within the United States of America, from a black person standpoint, a black person cannot literally generally sit right out and say that they don't have an opportunity to do anything or there's no opportunities for them because of a racial issue. And people might say, no, that's not true. That's false. Look at it. Back then, 1930s, 40s, 50s, you didn't have an there was things legally set in place from how the country was structured that stopped you from doing certain things. If you were black. That is a fact. You can't deny it, you can't go back and change it. It is just a fact. But if you fast forward from then all the way to now, it is not the same. But you get a lot of people running around saying, oh man, I didn't get this opportunity because I'm black. I didn't get this opportunity because X, Y, and Z. It's racism. And I think that's where the issue comes in at. And then you got this thing of different things that come up with different situations or whatever comes up. And people take this stuff and it's like, oh, it's racial. Not everything that happens is a racial thing. Is it there and does it happen? Yes. But at the complexity and the volume that people say that is happening, it's not, you can't factually prove that. Case in point, a lot of stuff when stuff comes up with this, it's like people will say, somebody, African American will go to a job, right? Don't get the job. First thing out their mouth, 9 times out of 10, is they didn't get the job because they're black. Now, in some instances, is this true? Yes, but is true and is founded at the highest clip that you hear the proportion of people saying that it is? I disagree. You can pull the numbers and look at it and just start playing Marco Polo with the situation if you want to go that route. But the fact that people will say they'll get on debates, they get on panels, or whatever, and they say, we don't have the same opportunities. We don't have the same opportunities. Well, how do you not? You have the ability to go to school. You have the ability to get an education. So what opportunities are you lacking? From an employment standpoint, hell, I've even gone through it, where you go to apply for a job and you might not get the job based off whatever reason you didn't get it. But just because you didn't get it doesn't, unless somebody literally to your face came to you and said, hey, for whatever reason, blah, 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 with racial tones, implemented that you didn't get the job, how can you sit there and say you didn't get the job because you're black? Like, make that make sense. Like, every time something happens, you get a lot of folks running around saying, well, I can't do this because the person's keeping me down. I can't do this because they're stopping us from doing X, Y, and Z. Or blatantly running out calling people racist when they're not. Just because you disagree with somebody's viewpoint or somebody's thought process doesn't automatically make that person a racist. But the stuff that you do and perpetuate from the black community, it seems like a lot of folks have issues with white folks. Which is fine to each his own. If that's how you want to roll and live your life, do that scope or that lens of every white person is against you, every white person is trying to screw you over, whatever situation that is. Hey, look, man, to get ahead in life and to grow and to move and do things, you're going to have to form relationships. Even if you look at the times when the racial stuff was going on and there was changes that was made to get black people to a certain standpoint, to get them out of certain situations, there was white people involved in that. At some point in time, you got to get to that natural core of yourself and be like, okay, sometimes you got to give people some stuff. Now, just because you forgive somebody for something doesn't mean you forget the stuff that happened. And I think that's the concept that a lot of folks in our community are missing. A lot of people run around that had nothing to do. You was not involved in it. You had no experience with it. Didn't touch it. It didn't even physically touch you. But they will say, from a generational standpoint, this is why we're doing this because of this, and the third. Like I said at the beginning, you can't deny that there was racism and it happened and stuff that went on during that time left a lasting mark, left impressions, stuff like that. But let's start diving into some stuff when you talk about black culture and ancestry and how black folks moved. If you look at a statistical breakdown, you can go pull the numbers. Actually, you can Google search it, use ChatGPT, whatever you want to use, and look at the breakdown of income per capita during the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. White people were making a certain amount of income, and black folks are right there. If white folks were making a certain amount, black folks were making about 50% of that during that time. Then you get into the push of obviously the civil rights movement, and then that's a big debate now going on with different things, stuff like that, and stuff's coming out. Because when things happen during that time, and I was talking to someone about this earlier, it's like a lot of things that happen with leaders for the black community, right? They were put in a certain stratosphere and a certain viewpoint that made them look like they were infallible. Infallible meaning like obviously like they could do no wrong. But then as stuff comes out, and then people will say that this stuff coming out is to denigrate the person or to make the person look a certain way or whatever the situation may be. But if the person did it, it's still a fact that they did it. I'll use Martin Luther King for an example, which is really this is going to cause all kinds of issues, and I know it is, but I'm just talking just based off of what I'm feeling at the time of having this conversation. People talk about the stuff that he did that wasn't seen in the light. People will say that, hey, the civil rights movement, people have viewpoints saying that the civil rights movement is almost similar to the Black Lives Matter movement, where things that was going on, certain things were set up for certain reasons to get certain reactions to do stuff like that. I haven't dived deep into that stuff, so I'm gonna talk about it. But this is the kind of stuff and conversations that are coming up. But like I said, if you look at it, there were certain things that came out about Martin Luther King about, hey, he cheating on his wife after giving a speech and saying X, Y, and Z. Not saying that his viewpoint stuff wasn't fallible, but then people will come out and say, like, yo, man, this dude was cheating on his wife. So how can you be saying and doing certain things where you're running around doing X, Y, and Z? And then you would tie that to another piece of you talking about people rag on a lot of men of the cloth. Black preachers, Jamal Bryant, for example, people will talk about him and say, how can he say the stuff that he says and do the stuff that he do when he has the personal turmoil and stuff that goes on with his situation, which said he was cheating on his wife, he was doing this, that, and third, and all this other stuff. So all this stuff is out there, but then these are the same people that people put on a pedestal and say, hey, this person is a good person, this person's a leader, whatever, stuff like that. And that doesn't mean that people can't make mistakes and can't be fallible, because we're all human and we understand that. But at the same time, you're putting people in categories and putting people on pedestals about stuff when you obviously see that they have their flaws and issues too. But then it compromises your speech, because you can't sit there and say and present yourself a certain way when you're doing stuff behind the shadows that don't align with the stuff that you're saying. So somebody make that make sense. Like, break it down and make it make sense to me. Somebody, like, from a cultural standpoint, things happen, community gets into an uproar. George Floyd happens, right? Everyone went crazy. It was wrong. Cop killed a dude. 100% agree. Somebody dying is not cool, especially when somebody's getting killed for getting killed for no reason. Obviously, the person got charged. Went through the criminal justice process. Cool, the person got convicted. Cool. But everybody stands up and is like, they'll use a person that has a history, has stuff going on, and then people completely whitewash that stuff. And what I mean whitewash is like, people forget the fact that sometimes when certain situations jump off, especially when it's a racial thing, people just focus heavily on the racial aspect of it. White person did something to a black person got killed or something bad happened to them. That has to be the focus. Now, and sometimes it is wrong, right? And stuff is jumping off, but then you look at the context of it. They would use certain situations and use a person as a catalyst to say, man, this is what happened to this person, this is wrong, blah, blah, blah. But then you do the nit and gritty of it, and then the catalyst is always, every time something happens to a black person, people say the first thing the media does is put out all the negative stuff about that particular person. But is the stuff negative if it's true? Explain that to me. If the person got a criminal record because they were doing violent crimes, and then something happens to them, yeah, if it wasn't a justified killing because of that current situation, yeah, that's wrong. But if somebody's bringing up the person's past and saying, hey, they probably ended up in this situation, not always the case, but in certain cases, end up in this situation because they lived a certain kind of lifestyle. They were doing certain things. So if you wasn't doing criminal activity, you wouldn't have had a situation with the cops. Some would say and make that argument, right? Then you got stuff where you have routine traffic stops where a routine traffic stop would happen, and then now all of a sudden, from a cultural standpoint, because people get into this thing of people, they're taking our power away. They trying to enforce their authority. They're an authoritative figure by the nature of the job. Now, some people do. You got folks that do take it to the extreme and get crazy with it, and yeah, those folks should be dealt with. But you can't take certain situations that you see and then try to take that blanket and put it on everybody else, which a lot of times in the black community, that's what happens. They'll take something that happens and they'll put a blanket on it and say, everybody that is in this scope is the same. That's what we do. Like, you see it all the time. So explain that to me. So how do we take a blanket for stuff that happens and then castrate and throw it out on everybody else? But then when we see people not in the community turn around and do the same thing to us, it's a big uproar. They can't say that. That's not the truth. We're not all the same. But yet you'll take that same concept and apply it to somebody else. Make it make sense. Like the logic just don't mesh. It don't add up. Then if, like I said, like I was talking earlier, just feel like I'm kind of getting sporadic and getting all over the place. Let me focus in and zone in. What I'm talking about is from a cultural standpoint, there are things that happen within the Black community that should be spoke on and should be talked about. Why? Because these are issues that are permeating the community that's keeping us from getting to where we need to get to. If you look at a per income by capita breakdown, the Asian community is at the highest tier. They're even higher than white people. So if the Asian community is higher than white people, which means from an income standpoint, they're at these, they have the opportunities, they have the situations where they're in a position to make more money and make more capital. If they're even making more capital than the white folks, how in the world can somebody sit there and say, well, the white folks are keeping us from doing X, Y, and Z? How? So their sole focus is crushing the Black folks. When, if you look at the historical makeup of the country, everybody is going, other than the white folks, obviously, because they were the ones running stuff. But even let's talk about that for example. But like if you look at that, and it seems like to me, if you look at the breakdown, I think at times our community gives more power to another community because based off of stuff that happened. So because you give them that power, because you're so quick to be like, they're keeping me down, they're doing this, they're keeping me from doing X, Y, and Z. They just keep running with it. As opposed to people talking about standing up and taking your power back and taking control of the things going on, we won't do it. There are things that happen, and every community has their issue. Every community has their stuff that's going on. The difference is for us, we're constantly stuck, to me, in this mindset of we're constantly complaining. Oh, this is going on. This is going on. This is going on. Instead of focusing on what the ancestors actually did, which has become self-sufficient. So you're not looking for a handout. You're not looking for somebody to give you something. You're not looking for somebody to provide you something. You went out and got it on your own. You went out and made your own. Getting people out of this, it's like for our community, it's like we just got to get out of this mindset of somebody giving you a handout. Somebody you're looking for somebody else to do something for you. We can't even come together to form anything to be able to be prosperous. And then when you get the small groups that do it and start to make a move, people will hate on you. You have people in your own community that will shoot you down and denigrate you because you're doing something with yourself and you're advancing. And like I said, this is not a blanket to say everybody can do this, because you got different segments of the community that move a certain way and do certain things. But if you look at the majority as a whole, like, and you start breaking it down to those particular things, that's what happens. Why aren't, from a community standpoint, why aren't more prominent folks celebrated? And when I mean prominent, it's when people that went through the grind of going to school, getting a decent job, and I would say more than a decent job, or doing something where they've set themselves up from a financial standpoint by growing and working, making the connections, because you can't do it on your own. You can at times if you get lucky, you strike up a thing. But hell, you look at Black culture and people talking about something, oh man, we need to support the community. If you do a poll right now, literally do a poll right now and post it online somewhere and say, hey, if a Black person sets up a business, how many people are going to go support that business? You'll get a 50-50 split. Why? Because the narrative is Black-owned businesses are not professional. They don't do things the right way. This is the third, blah, 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 blah. And that's not a blanket on all, because you have a lot of successful Black businesses and a lot of successful folks, entrepreneurs that started on business that are doing great and thriving. But if you look at, for community, if you look at dive deep into the different communities and look at the breakdowns, you would literally see that somebody can open up a store in a community trying to provide something, trying to do something, and you get people robbing the store, you get people running up in the store saying they want a discount, this is and the third, when a person's trying to be profitable and trying to help the community by taking the money that they've made or trying to establish something in the community to grow it and make it better. But people denigrate you. Why? People get jealous. For whatever reason, people feel like you owe them something for whatever reason. Why is that? What the hell happened? Like literally, what happened? They talk about the stuff with our ancestors, like getting out of slavery and stuff like that. And what do? They got out and they worked. They grind. They pushed through. Even though those times on the 60s, 70s, civil rights movement, stuff like that going on, people were working. People were grinding. Working on getting in those little cracks to set themselves up to do something. So if you look at situations back then and you looking at the way stuff was, like I said, look at the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Look at all the stuff they had to deal with then. And they built their own communities and they set themselves up and they were being self-sufficient. Now, yeah, things happen like Black Wall Street, for example. We all know Black Wall Street happened. Community of African Americans thriving. The Harlem Renaissance piece, the cats in Harlem thriving. And what happened? Yeah, situations happened and people came in and screwed it up. Right? But the fact is, even if that it's messed up that those communities ended up getting in situations where it was stuff happened, people came in, jacked it up or whatever. But the whole fact of the matter is what happened to that mindset? What happened to that internal fire, that internal push to be like, I want to be successful. I'm going to be successful. I'm going to change the trajectory of my family by working hard and setting our family up. What happened? Then it became like almost like a get rich quick scheme. People wanted to push to be athletes. Why? Because it was like, hey, that's a quick way to make money. And what happened with most athletes? Might not be the case now, but at one point, what happened? People was like, forget school. I'm only going to the school so I can get to the next level, which is to make money. So they kind of moseyed their way on through. Then what happened? Okay, they get to a league, whatever professional league they get to, they making money. Then something catastrophic happened. They have a catastrophic injury. Career's over. They have nothing to fall back on. Nothing. Unless they were smart with their money. But if you look at it, most people that get that kind of money are coming from some kind of hardship. So the minute they get money, they start living and perpetuating based off of what they saw the other person do. So most athletes end up going broke. Then from a community standpoint, like my family had to talk about it when we were talking about like people winning the lotto. Like, hey man, you hit the lotto, what you gonna do? Man, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z. This is in the third. Or people talk about reparations. Let's dive into that piece. From a cultural standpoint, reparations. People like, we need reparations for what happened to us and how this happened. Okay, cool. How are you going to get it? Not even that. Not even how you get the reparations. Okay, cool. So they push through. Okay, boom. They get reparations. They give every person 100 grand. What do you think, per average, what do you think the people in the Black community are going to do with that money? I have an idea based off of the culture and what is perpetuated out there. You got some that's going to be smart with it. They're going to invest it, move the money how they need to move to set themselves up financially for the rest of their life. Start working on a way to build generational wealth. But probably like a good chunk of majority, the ghetto folks, whatever the folks that's just trying to be ghetto fab, like they did with the PPP stuff when COVID happened, getting the money, splurging, buying all kinds of stuff that you know you should have been buying, doing all kinds of craziness, just not doing anything with the money. 100 grand, especially with the way the economy is now, I guarantee you 90% of the people, I want to say 90%. I'll say about 50, I'll go half. I'll be generous. 50% of the folks that if they got reparations and got 100 grand in reparations, they would take that money and blow it and end up broke. And then will literally turn around and say, we need more. We need more. Celebrate a rapper. Talks about having multiple women, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, not living right, not doing anything smart with it, with their money. Celebrate it. But then they'll kill a guy working a 9 to 5, making a decent living, providing for his family, gets no love, gets no shot, gets no celebration. Why? When back in the day, that's what people strive to be. You strive to be a working man. Get your money, make your money, provide, take care of your family. But now it's like, what happened? Like I said, it keeps going back to like looking at the culture, and it's like, what happened? You got people that are so vile, so ignorant in their thinking, because hive mindset, even in the black community, you get a lot of it, a hive mindset where you'll go with whatever the hottest talking point is or whatever said, that must be the truth. That's what everybody wrote with. Instead of taking the time, do your own research, get your own information, and then make an informed decision. Even from a political standpoint, everybody in the black community, 9 times out of 10, votes Democrat. Why? And they'll say, oh, well, Republicans are this way, and they only think this way, or whatever, stuff like that. I look at politics, when I break it down, it's the lesser of two evils. All politicians lie, scheme, do different things to make sure that they're setting themselves up. It's just the way it is. That's the way the system is. That's the way the system is set up. That's why you got politicians whose average salary should be one thing, but then their net worth is over $3 or $4 million. How? Your salary don't even equate to that, but that's the way it breaks down. But from a political standpoint, if you get into the politics piece for the black community heavily votes Democrat. Why? They don't do, like, it's like if you look at a breakdown, like I said, I voted both. I voted Republican before, I voted Democrat. I've done both. But the reason I do that is because if you look at the breakdown and you actually look at what the candidates are, what they're trying to push for policy and things of that nature, and you look at it, it's like the same thing when people used to do when you're trying to make a heavy decision back in the day. People used to like, these were pros and cons lists. This is a situation. What are the good stuff? Check, 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 check. What are the bad stuff? Check, 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 check. And then depending on which one outweighs the other, which one got the more checks, that's the way you go with. That's how you roll. So if you're looking at that and you're looking at stuff from a cultural standpoint, that's what we're lacking. You get so many black folks that jump up and say they can't get something because white man's keeping them down, or racism, or they go back to systemic racism and things of that nature. Yes, nobody can sit there and say that it didn't happen. You can't. It did. There's a lot of jacked up stuff that happened. But how long are you going to hold on to that narrative about, well, this happened back then? You wasn't even alive. Had nothing to do with you. All that stuff happened, and now you move forward to all the stuff you talk about, Civil Rights Act, and all these different things that happened that were made to help close the gap, as they say, and make things better. But if you look at it, the way the black community was back in those times when stuff was really jacked up and you had a lot of restrictions and a lot of things stopping you from making progress. So if back then they had so many things stopping them from making progress, how in the world were they able to make progress as opposed to now when you have all these programs, all these opportunities, all these things that are there to help you, affirmative action, DI, all this other stuff that was pushed out there to help you succeed, but yet you're still not succeeding. Whose fault is it if you're not succeeding? You have every opportunity in the world to succeed and you don't succeed. Whose fault is it? People still doing, oh man, well, they got X, Y, and Z going on. That's still keeping us from doing that. I have cousins and family members that have gone to college, got degrees, working, making money, taking care of their family, doing the stuff they need to do. Then you got folks sitting out there that's just being lazy, won't do anything, but then will quickly jump up and say that they're being held down from doing the things that they want to do because they don't have an opportunity. Why is it, like I said, when I looked at it, if you look at we don't have opportunities and stuff like that, economics, and you talking about income rates, how is the Asian community sitting higher? People will say, well, they didn't experience the same things we did. Well, if you look at history, Chinese Exclusion Act, Japanese internment camps. So they went through their struggle. The Latino community went through their struggle, immigration, not being able to speak the language, things of that nature. But what's the difference? If you look at a cultural difference, like we used to be the ones that was doing the heavy labor in those crusty jobs. Now, folks too good for it. I'm not going back to that. That's like slavery. You worked it before, made good living and income off of it. Folks got promoted, made supervisor, made manager, made progress to the point where they start at the bottom and work their way up. But now nobody wants to do that. Everybody wants to be quick. You want to have no experience or no know-how, but you feel you should be a supervisor. Have no experience or know-how, but you want somebody to let you lead. You don't know how to follow, but you feel like you can lead. Somebody make it make sense. Like the concept of this stuff just blows my mind. And it's like you look at it, and the more you hear people speak and talk about certain things, and people whine and cry about certain things, you're like, bro, you can't be people can't be that ignorant. You just can't be. But that's what's perpetuated out there. And then when it's called out, you're an Uncle Tom. You just want to roll with the white folks. You don't like black people. It's not the point of not liking black people, but it's the laziness that happens in our community that drives me freaking insane. And that's not saying everybody's lazy, but there's a good chunk of folks that are lazy. And I mean lazy in a whole variety of ways. You got dudes like having kids with people that they're not taking care of, being deadbeat dads, not taking care of responsibility, all kinds of crazy stuff. So that like nobody gets a pass, and it's just a lot of stuff within the community that's just jacked up. Jacked up. And trust by all no means, I'm not sitting here saying like I'm some person that got it all figured out, that's got rock and roll and doing all this stuff. No, I got my flaws and issues just like everybody else do. But the difference is I go out and work and try to do the things that I can do to improve myself and make myself better, to give myself more opportunities, to be able to make myself more successful, and to give myself a chance to be able to build and set myself up for a future to be able to take care of my child, because I do have a child, and to make sure she has stuff that she needs to be able to provide and rock and roll. But it bugs me to see people sit around and cry and complain. They want to say, it's this person's fault. It's this person's fault. Why happened to forgiveness? Like as a community, at some point in time, man, and people like, we can't forget because they keep doing stuff to us. Well, they keep doing stuff to us because you keep putting yourselves in a position 9 times out of 10 to allow them to keep doing it to you. You keep giving people power over you, they're going to keep exerting that power over you. That's just the way it works. The more you say, well, I can't do this because they're keeping me down, the more it's going to happen. As opposed to really being like our ancestors and being like, yo, F it. I'm going to go get mine, but not getting yours by stepping on the other person or trying to screw somebody over or trying to take what somebody else worked hard for to get. It trips me out. Like it blows my mind. And it's like, I'm sitting here saying this stuff, and I'm sure some people are going to jump up and be like, oh man, you got issues with black folks. I don't. It's the thing is like, it bugs me when I go out and see capable people that have the means, that have the know-how to go out and provide and succeed or be successful more than what they are now, and they choose not to do it because their first inclination is it's somebody else's fault. This person is stopping me from doing that. They keeping me from being able to succeed. They not letting me have the opportunity. Well, what opportunity do you need? You got an opportunity to go to school. Most folks choose not to. Why? Like you can't, like a lot of times people will make a statement about something, they can't even substantiate their statements with facts. So it makes you sound ignorant, non-educated. But if you call somebody in the black community non-educated, people get pissed off with you. Oh man, you trying to take a shot. You trying to say something. No, it's a fact. You just not making good decisions. You're not being smart about how you move. At the end of the day, for anybody to be successful, yeah, you can lean on your main community to help push you and elevate you to get you rolling. But you have to grow in life and to be able to succeed in life, you have to form relationships. You have to form relationships with people other than your norm. I tell people all the time, and it trips me out. You get folks that'll stay in a certain community, they won't leave, they won't grow, they won't do anything. They don't immerse themselves in other cultures. And what I mean by that is exposing yourself to things outside of your norm. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's a thing they say to us in the military all the time when I was in the military. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. Why? Because when you get used to getting outside of your comfort zone, it allows you to grow and expand and to get better. A lot of folks in the black community will have a certain mindset, and then when they leave and go to a college outside of their normal bubble, they're like, oh, snap. The stuff that I was seeing is not normal. The stuff that was going on, it don't mesh. This is weird. But when you stay inside of a bubble and don't grow, you end up stuck in the same mindset. Like I saw a clip, I don't even know who the person was talking that said it, but they was talking about something that the reason we don't The reason we run when we laugh is because on the plantation we weren't allowed to laugh. What? Somebody make that make sense. Even if you know how genetics works and how certain things carry over from a genetic standpoint, certain mindsets and stuff like that, that's not a genetic thing. That's just a mindset. And a mindset is perpetuated by the person that continues to reinsert that into the mindset. That's like racism. People are not born racist. That might be an epiphany for some folks, but people are not. It's learned behavior. If you take two kids, stick them together, they're going to play and do whatever. The minute you start in certain things about race or whatever, stuff like that, that's where stuff gets convoluted. And then that's what becomes a person, that becomes the focal point. And then that's how they function and move. I've been around so many different races, so many different cultures at different points in times. And you see the differences and you see the nuances in it. Like, folks will work. And it's like, that's why I said it trips me out when I look at the Black community and I'm like, man, our history is so rich when it comes to just intelligent people. History is rich, full of them. But that's not the stuff that the community leans on. You want to lean on the stuff where, oh, this has happened and this is what's going on, stuff like that. Like, lean on the rich history that we have. Use that to motivate yourself. 13% of the population. They say that's what we make up. 13% of the population. 13%. Why is the percentage not higher? You got people having abortions, all other stuff that happens. Why? Whose fault is that? You gonna say that's the white person's fault too? You gonna say that's somebody else's fault? You're stuck in this situation because it's somebody else's fault. No, you made a decision to do something that led to a child. Now you're in a situation where you got to figure out what to do. But it's like, then you get the folks that will have a child when with the government assistance piece and just continue to do it. I seen a girl posted a video and it tripped me out. And I was like, dude, she on some other stuff. Just the thought process was just ignorant. The chick said people get upset with people that sit around and have kids on government assistance and people shouldn't say nothing to them because the people that work and send their kids to daycare while they're working are doing the same thing as the folks that are having kids and getting the government assistance. I'm like, where in the hell does that make sense? Like, somebody make that make sense to me. So because I decided to work to provide for my child, and in order for me to be able to do that, my child has to be in some kind of care while I'm working. You're telling me that me paying for somebody to watch over my child while I'm working to provide for my child is the same as you sitting on your behind and doing nothing and collecting a check? Then the person turned around and was like, yeah, y'all dropping your kids off at daycare because y'all don't want to raise y'all kids. Y'all want somebody else to raise them. No. My kid was in the daycare because I have to work. I have to provide for that child. And trust me, people ain't just willy-nilly taking their kids to daycare because daycare in some places, if you're going to a good one and one that actually has some kind of substance to it, it's the same as paying rent. So you're paying it twice, $1,200 to $1,300 for daycare. So you're paying whatever your rent mortgage is for your child to be there while you're working and trying to provide for your child, as well as paying all the other stuff that you got to take care of. Trust me, people ain't just up and willing, just throwing money away. But this is the concept that some people have. Laziness, pure laziness. And then you want to justify your laziness by trying to denigrate somebody for actually doing the right thing. Make it make sense. This stuff trips me out. It trips me out. But seriously, I honestly believe from a cultural standpoint, like the Black community as a whole, we got millionaires, billionaires. We got folks that are actually making some legit money, right? And then people will turn around and say they need to turn around and dump that back they need to give back. They need to give back. In some regards, yeah, I can see where that plays a part. But me and my cousin say this all the time. I'm not throwing money at a bad situation. That's a bad investment. Most of the folks that are making money invest. Why? Because you pour money into something and it grows your money. If I'm pouring money into a neighborhood that ain't doing nothing, it's not going to be successful, that's a lost investment. And the people are like, well, you don't know if you don't pour money into the neighborhood. You can see what is the nature of the folks in the neighborhood. People looking for a handout. Not all, but a good chunk looking for a handout. And I think that's where our community as a whole is lacking. Where other communities pull together, they work, they support each other, they uplift each other, do all this stuff. We won't do it. You will take somebody that's doing something, be successful, and then turn around and tell you that you think you're better than them because you're doing something and they're not. It's a crime. To the community, it's a crime. And people don't see it. But when it's called out, the cultural things are called out, how certain things are promoted and pushed and glorified, you get killed for it. But then you'll let people like Dr. Umar, for example, finessing women 24, finessing people for years, building the school. He building the school. Then you look at the videos that this dude was posting about, he begging for money. And people glorify this dude. Oh man, like me for the culture, man. This and that. No, you're a crook. But then people look at in the community, you get a successful black person giving knowledge, trying to give insight and stuff like that. And then people turn around and denigrate him because they don't agree with some of the stuff that he's saying. Why? But then you want this same person that's successful and is making money to come back and pour into stuff that people are not even appreciative of the stuff that the nuggets that they're trying to drop. I don't get it. It makes no sense to me. It trips me out. I'll say in closing, from a community standpoint, I think we need to get back to our roots, and our roots being getting to a point where you work on being self-sufficient, even as a community as a whole being self-sufficient, so we're not dependent on other stuff. And as individuals, being sufficient enough to be able to set yourself up and go out and get your own. Build your legacy. Build your in a sense, just build your legacy. Build something that's tangible for you, for yourself, and for your family to be successful moving forward. Giving your kids the opportunities that you might not have, but you had to work to get to, but making their life a little bit easier by providing things to them so that they can go out and be successful. So they can skip a lot of the struggles, but still showing them the true value and the nature of working hard, grinding, and making a way for themselves to be able to have an opportunity to be able to do something, as opposed to waiting for somebody to give you a handout. Go out and get it, man. Black community, man, go out and get it. Go get it. Stop being dependent and waiting on other people to give you something. If you feel you earned it and you feel you need to go get it, go get it. Yeah, you're going to run into roadblocks. You're going to run into bumps. You're going to run into trips and falls and stumbles. But our ancestors ran into the same thing. And like I said, how you look at them in the 1930s, the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, grinding with all the stuff that they had to deal with. All the stuff they had to deal with, and they were still successful. Still able to make it happen. Still able to make a way. And you look at all the opportunities and all the open space that we have now, and we're not even using half of our potential to get to where we need to get to. So I say in closing, man, go get it. If you're watching this, make sure you click a like for the algorithm so we can get this thing growing and keep it moving. If you disagree with some of the stuff I said, obviously put it in the comments, man. Let's talk about it. But if it's talking to anybody and it's hitting the impact with somebody, let it be a push for you. Go get yours. Go grind and get it. Do it the right way. Don't be out here doing illegal stuff and robbing people, doing all that craziness. Go grind and get it. If you don't have your education, go get your education. If you have your education, expound upon it. Grow it. Make it better. Make yourself stand out. So when you go into these interviews or you go into these talks or you go into these rooms, you can sit there and stand on your own 2 feet and have something legit and real to say to show that you have value and that you have something to offer. Because literally what we're doing is you're selling yourself to companies and stuff like that to be able to grow and seek employment, all that kind of stuff. If you are a person that got an entrepreneurial spirit, go out there and grind. But understand that it's going to be a struggle. You got to push. And you got to push to get to where you need to get to. You're going to grind long hours, long weekends, no time off, all that kind of stuff. Go get it, people. Go get it. Y'all have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next pod. Be easy.